This is Diana Davis reporting from PEX Week USA, and I'm joined today by Steve Towers, who's co-founder and CEO of the BP Group. So Steve, what do you see as some of the key trends that are emerging this year within process excellence?
Well, the focus on enterprises is certainly now much more customer oriented. There's so much more information out there now, so organisations who are doing things like Net Promoter Score, organisations who are using more advanced sort of ideas arising from Net Promoter Score, meaning that the focus of projects and the people inside organisations and enterprises is changing now. So the dialogue isn't so much about how skilled I am at a particular technique, but how is what I'm doing going to really contribute to achieving those deliverables, which are going to move the metric on the customer satisfaction Net Promoter Score, and advanced sort of thinking around customer satisfaction surveys. That's a big trend. And the way I see that really playing out is that, for instance, if you bumped into the CEO and you have that 30-second elevator sort of test, he's less interested or she's less interested now in you've come in on time to budget and achieve the deliverables. They're much more interested in, well, how's this going to contribute to our public delivery, and more particularly some of the challenges that they're facing and being beaten up about. How's that going to resonate out in the market generally? How's it going to move the market for us?
Is there also an element of technology becoming much more important within the process excellence community?
Well, again, one of the areas that I suppose historically, and being around in as long as I have, you've seen technology dealt with in many different ways. What we're seeing now is less discussion about technology and more discussion about capability. So we've all seen on the internet the picture of the sort of 3-month-old child playing with the iPad. And so I think the technology discussion has moved in that direction. It's less about educating people in the use of technology and more what can technology provide. As a consequence, some of the things that organisations are doing now, like embracing mobile platforms, isn't about massive infrastructure investment. It's about the utilisation of the existing things that we've already got in combination with the smartphone idea, so that people can access the systems, they can become much more self-service oriented, they can do much more for themselves as consumers who have much more information than they ever had before. So the technology dialogue isn't so much about how do we build a massive enterprise system, it's much more about how do we provide the capability at the point of customer contact.
Now, going back to that focus on customer outcomes and improving customer satisfaction, what do you think is really driving that trend?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. You're only as good as your last customer interaction. And we all know the sort of negative side effects of Twitter and how something can explode. But in the same sort of way, good news travels just as fast as bad news. And so people who are really performing well create an expectation, and other people move towards that expectation. So we could see that, for instance, in the airline industry, where progressive organisations very much know that the last interaction you had on the airline is going to dictate how many people you tell about that. But not only how many people you tell about, who you share that with in family and friends, and where you're going to put your business in the future. So the customer outcome thing is very important, and of course that's very much allied with this digital capability, is being able to provide at the point of contact. So there's some horror stories. For instance, I was hearing a story the other day about one particular US airline who was saying they'd done a customer survey, and the customer survey said people didn't want sort of in-seat films in sort of 4 or 5 hour flights across the US. Well, who on earth did they ask that question of, and who said that's what they wanted? Whereas the smart organisations, who are much more focused around customer outcomes, actually go and figure out what the customers need, even when customers don't know they need it themselves. So when you sit down on, say, a WestJet flight and you can get in-satellite movies and that sort of thing, it's a really quite a different experience from some of those older, more classic organisations who are still asking, what do you want?
So now, how in process excellence then do we need to shift our thinking in order to respond to those new emerging trends?
Oh, I think there's a big mind shift underway, and we can very ably see that with those people who are involved in the process excellence community who embrace this idea of customer outcomes and are aligning their work to deliver that, as opposed to those people who are still saying, well, what we did in the past in terms of our approach, whether it's Six Sigma, Lean or BPM, whatever we were doing in the past, we just need to try harder. Well, trying harder isn't the solution anymore. It's about getting smarter at what we do and not being able to embrace every aspect of all the training that goes on with process excellence, but the specific things that are to do with your organisation and the customer outcomes you're trying to deliver. and then make sure that people are focused against that increasingly. So for process excellence people, the challenge is no longer to be looking at the past and learning what people did, but more trying to anticipate the future and get themselves in a position where they can really help their organisations at a day-to-day tactical level, but more importantly contribute those tactical level thinkings towards a strategic delivery, which is better successful customer outcomes.
So my final question, and looking towards that future that you've just mentioned, what are some of the skills and capabilities that you think process practitioners will need to have in order to make that a reality?
Good question. I like the question from the point of view of we've always thought that we've got a list of techniques, and if we learn those techniques then we get a tick in the box and we're now qualified. That's just a question of you might have learned techniques. The people who are really successful with process excellence at the moment are individuals in their organisations who have a capability which can embrace both a strategic level of thinking, where is it the organisation's going and how are we going to get there, but in a day-to-day context, and our projects that we're working on, how does that contribute? So if you like, connecting the dots between the day-to-day tactical things that I'm doing to improve business and project delivery to the actual strategic outcome of the organisation. And that's always been, not all people can have that skill set. Some people are very good at tactics, others are good at strategy, but the really good process excellence people, those people who sort of get qualified, understand it's about being able to connect the dots.
Steve, thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure. It's always a great pleasure to be involved in the PEX event. Yeah, thank you.